G'day and welcome to Inside Rugby. My name is Mark. I'm a Kiwi rugby fan living here in beautiful Cancun in Mexico. Now in today's video I wanted to talk about Razor Robertson, the All Black coach, and Rassie Erasmus, and how they'll be keeping a very close eye on this year's Six Nations competition. Now it's only 10 days or so until the Six Nations competition, and I think there's going to be two very interested observers at this year's competition, and that's going to be Rassie Erasmus from South Africa and Scott Razor Robertson from New Zealand. Yes, I think those two coaches are going to be keeping a very close eye on what's happening at this year's Six Nations. And the reason for that is, well, they've both got teams that are going to be visiting their countries and taking on their national teams at the beginning of this year's international season for those two teams. So of course I talk about the English team that's going to be travelling to New Zealand the first time since 2014, taking on the All Blacks in a two-test series down under, and then they will have a third game which is going to be part of the autumn series at Twickenham back in November. So this year in total, out of the 15 test matches that the All Blacks will play, they will play England 3 times. So Scott Razor Robertson's going to be very interested to see what happens with England's performance at this year's Six Nations, and I'm sure he's going to be keeping a very close eye on what kind of play and also the players that are involved in that particular series. On the other hand, Rassie Erasmus of course is going to be watching the Irish team, and Ireland are going to be travelling to South Africa to kick off South Africa's international season this year, and again a two-match series for Ireland in South Africa. And there is going to be a third game when South Africa travel to Europe at the end of the year, pretty much like the All Blacks in the autumn series. So we've got a feast of fantastic rugby coming up, and I think these two guys are going to be keeping a close eye on what happens in the Six Nations. Now I think the first thing that both Rassie and Razor are going to observe is the differences between what happened in the World Cup teams and the teams that step out in the Six Nations for both England and for Ireland. Expect to see some changes and to expect to see a different style of play. Of course Ireland's going to be different without Johnny Sexton, and there are a couple of other players that are out injured, and it may not be the squad that ends up going to South Africa. Of course we'll have to wait and see for that, but it's going to give Rassie Erasmus a little bit of an opportunity to see what Ireland are going to do this year and how they fare in that Six Nations competition. I'm not picking them to win that competition. I think France is going to win the Six Nations this year, and I think Ireland are going to be kind of rebirthing their process in terms of players coming into that system. Andy Farrell is a fantastic coach, and I expect him to work it out pretty quickly, but I think they might have a couple of tough games in the beginning, and as a result of that, by the time they get ready to go to South Africa on that tour, then I think it's going to be all on. So I think Rassie is going to watch that progression very closely to see what Ireland do throughout the Six Nations. Now for England travelling down to New Zealand to play a two-match tour, it's a different game altogether down there in terms of the climate, the people, the surroundings, the atmosphere. It's going into the Lions' Den, of course, and the All Blacks are going to be a very different team under Razor Robertson, I believe. So it's going to be a fascinating series to see what happens. It's going to be really interesting, don't you think, to see what England do in the Six Nations, what kind of style they play. I've had some of you commenting on my channel saying that England are going to keep sticking to that very structured game, that kicking game, a game where they just get ahead and win games. And I had others of you commenting that we're going to see a more expansive England this year with Steve Borthwick and Jamie George as the captain. So that's going to be really interesting. Now there's going to be no doubt that Razor Robertson focuses a lot of his energy on the All Blacks and making sure he knows what they're doing and getting their game plan right. But he's also someone that does a meticulous job of looking at the opposition, working out where their weaknesses are, and trying to put a game plan around being able to beat them. So you combine those two ingredients, and I think Razor Robertson's going to come up with an awesome plan to be able to take on England when England travel to New Zealand in July of this year. Now my forward prediction for both of those series is that I think South Africa is going to beat Ireland in South Africa, and I think the All Blacks are going to beat England in both of those games in New Zealand, but we'll have to wait and see. But before we get to those two big contests, we'll wait and see what happens at the Six Nations and just see how England and Ireland end up. But I can bet you bottom dollar that those two coaches are going to have a very, very close look at what's going on in the Six Nations. Something else that will have to be factored in during the Six Nations as well is going to be injury. So if anybody gets a serious injury, it may keep them out of going to either New Zealand or South Africa on those tours for England and for Ireland. So that'll be something else that Rassie and Robertson will be noting for sure. It's going to be a fascinating year this year. We've got the best new coaches coming up against each other. We've got Joe Schmidt, of course, now in the Australian Wallaby camp, and we're hoping to see some great things from them this year, if it's not too early for them to turn around their ship as well. So yeah, a lot of interest in the Six Nations starting in about 10 days time, and no more so than those two particular coaches, Rassie Erasmus and also Scott Razor Robertson in New Zealand. Let me know your thoughts around this one. Short video today, I just thought I'd put it out there because it's going to be an interesting spectacle as we kick off the Six Nations. What do you think Rassie and Razor are going to learn from the Six Nations this year? And do you think it's going to change their game plan very much in going up against Ireland and England respectively when those two teams tour their country? I'd love to hear from you in the comments on that one. Okay, that's it for today's video. I'll be back again very soon with some more content. Until then, stay safe, stay well everyone, and time to say adios from beautiful Mexico. Bye for now.